that you can see and hear us. We are trying to monitor everything and starting in a few seconds.
I could see and hear in YouTube and in LinkedIn.
Yeah, looks like everything works. And so hello everyone again. As I said, this is Bogdan Maherus and a great company here. And we are starting our next session of the Data Community United for Ukraine. Today we have a great speaker, Reza Rad, CEO of RADACAD, Microsoft Regional Director, author of a lot of books. And if you are working with Power BI, I guess you should know Reza, and he has a great blog, RADACAD. So if you had any issues during your professional life working with Power BI, I guess this is one of the most important resources where you can find answers and good articles. And of course, today we have our friends, Andrea Melancia and Jan Sarka. Thank you for coming today, as usual, as we do the last few months. And today we are fundraising funds for our defenders, Ukrainian defenders who are at the front line and need copters to see the enemy and come back alive when the war is over, to come back to their homes, to their families, kids and relatives. So this fundraising is very important to help Ukraine win. So you can find the link to donate in the description of the video which you are watching right now. This is in YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. You can watch us on different platforms. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel where we are going to continue our live streams to produce high quality content and be effective. Thank you for coming today. Looks like, I hope I didn't forget anything. Reza, we are talking today about Power BI Datamarts. So it's the feature that was deployed a few months ago, maybe already half a year ago. I guess it will be a good presentation. Your turn. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Bogdan. I'll share my screen. Just let me know if you can see my screen.
Black screen for now.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
So it should come in a second. Still no screen. Okay, let me see the meeting controls. I can stop sharing and start again. So stop sharing. Share again. This is the screen. Share. Okay, hopefully this time works better. It says your screen share is loading.
So
still nothing? Okay.
Still nothing.
Some message we haven't seen yet, out of curiosity.
It says that please restart screen sharing as it has stopped unexpectedly. Okay, why it hasn't stopped? Okay, let's do that again. Share screen. Now it gives me an error whenever I want to start it. Let me just try a different screen to see, is it a screen problem or something else?
You can rejoin the session and it could help.
Oh yeah, let me do that. Sorry, everyone. I'll just be joining in a few seconds again.
That's okay. Like every session that's live, we always have issues. So perfectly normal.
Okay, while he's gone, I will just quickly try to share my screen. And you should see it.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
The retesting is okay. It's okay.
Okay, so we know that the problem is on Reza's side.
Well, technically, he is on the other side of the world, literally on the other side of the world. So
Yes.
maybe it takes longer.
Also, you know, they are turned around on their heads, so it has to turn around the screen as well.
That's okay. We'll wait. So Reza is back. Let's
Yes.
just wait a few seconds, setting up things.
Okay, I'm back. Let's see if I can get screen sharing working this time.
We were
We
actually
just
saying,
tested. It works on our side, and it looks like something's wrong.
okay, double
Yeah,
click.
if it doesn't work on my side,
Mm.
might be because of, yeah, I think it doesn't still work. You don't see anything yet, do you?
No,
No.
no.
Okay, so let me just switch my camera. It might be because of the, because I'm using OBS for the camera. So I'll switch into my normal webcam, this one.
Okay,
Yes.
that's a lot.
Yes.
Bringing this over here, then
Bigger zoom.
OBS.
It looks like you are an MVP somehow.
Okay, now let's see if this makes it better. Okay, now share screen again. Fingers crossed.
No black screen.
Oh, that doesn't really screen.
Are you sharing the whole screen or just a
Yeah,
window?
yeah, I'm sharing the screen and
Maybe the correct screen.
yeah, let me share just 1 second. I'll share this screen to see if it
Okay,
is.
let's test it out.
Okay, no, still not. Just give
I'm
me a
not sure
second.
whether Zoom can work from the browser.
Oh,
Did anyone
joining
try
from
it?
browser, that can be also something to check, maybe.
I have it installed. It usually works well installed, but I haven't tried on browser.
We are
Yeah.
usually using it from
I'll
the
try
desktop.
to stop some of the services on my machine. Maybe those helps with this. Okay. Task manager closing. Couple of those that might be the problem. Yeah, it doesn't really look like I have anything else. Sharing again. Okay,
so
let me
we
just
already
close my camera for a second.
okay. So
And
we
try
already
share.
have some suggestions on the comments
Restarting
already.
the system.
You start the system. That's not a bad idea, actually. Okay, just give me a second. I'll be back in a minute.
No worries. So Christian from let's see, from Romania is actually suggesting a reboot. So yes, the IT technique, no worries.
By the way, Andrea, have you already tested the Datamarts feature in Power BI? You are
I have not.
great fan
But
of Power BI.
I'm looking forward to seeing this.
By the way, I have already, and looks like the documentation differs a bit from the reality. So, for example, the timeout for the refresh, Datamart refresh is 12 hours, not 24. So if anyone faces the same issue, just let me know how you handle that. And by the way, looks like it doesn't have API, which you can call and handle Datamarts like you do with data flows.
Mhm.
So guys, if you have any questions about Datamarts or you have some experience or issues with that, you can comment And by the way, we can discuss that during the session with Reza, who is joining.
We would love to see those kind of questions. In most of these technologies, in the first few months, there's always some buggy thing. This is normal. Nowadays, everyone does development in an agile way, so not everything is constructed. It's like having a bridge. Half the bridge is missing. You're still expected to jump, but hopefully, some of the things that you mentioned will be fixed in the near future. And API access is definitely one that we always need to automate things. Otherwise, it's not DevOps. It's just pressing a button. It doesn't count.
Yeah, and by the way, I was surprised that the direct query to Power BI Datamarts work fast. So I didn't expect it, but so it was on 3 months of data, and it worked fast. I tried to use the import mode, but unfortunately, the import mode fails, and it takes hours, days working with Microsoft support to find why it happens, but the answer could be really easy. This is the preview feature, and no one guarantees that everything works as expected.
Correct. So Reza is back. Let's see. Okay, so we have
fingers crossed.
Yes.
We can see it.
It works.
Oh yes.
It works. It works. Okay.
So
restart always works, right? Okay, let me turn on my camera as well.
So let's thank everyone. Let's thank Christian from Romania for suggesting that in the Q&A. Okay, let's go for this.
Okay, perfect. So I'll bring a slideshow. Great, awesome. So thank you everyone for joining. Sorry about the system issues. I should have restarted before. Thanks, Bogdan, for hosting it. Andre and Diane for moderating the questions. Really appreciate that. And if you are watching this, please use the fundraising link and help Ukrainian people. We are sitting in our house. We don't have any ideas what hardship they are in. So anything you can help would be better than nothing. Okay, now what is this session about? This is about Power BI Datamart, one of the most recent additions into the Power BI ecosystem. I'm going to get you through the whole process of what it is, how we can use it, some demos of it as well. A little bit about me. I'm Reza Rad. I'm based in Auckland, New Zealand. I have written some books on Power BI and some video courses, which you can access them in RADACAD website. I also write blogs and create YouTube videos, which are free to use. Make sure to go ahead and check them out. There are some materials that can help you in your Power BI journey. Okay, now, in order for you to understand what the Power BI Datamart is, first we need to talk about the story of how Power BI came into place. So before the word of Power BI, before the word of self-service BI, in fact, we had a traditional BI system. Traditional BI system means that if someone wants to be a BI developer, they needed to learn a lot of technologies and a lot of concept. Like, for example, if you wanted to be a SQL Server BI developer using SQL Server 2012, SQL Server 2008, or SQL Server 2005, any of those editions, you had to learn SQL Server reporting services, integration services, analysis services. In addition to those, probably you needed to learn master data services, data quality services. If you wanted to pass like Microsoft exams for it, it was like 5 exams in the Microsoft space. And I'm focusing on Microsoft area because that is the area that I'm most familiar with. But all other technologies also had similar situations. If you wanted to work with ClickView, that was a big product for itself. IBM Cognos, each of those was such a big product and comprehensive that learning it was like a few years journey to learn it and master it. And because of that, only a specific group of people had this ability to build BI systems. So that ended up with every organization having their own BI department that people came and asked questions. Like, for example, if someone from finance wants a report, they come to the BI department and ask for the data, ask for the report. From the time that they request for that report until the time that they get the report, it took a lot of time because it's a BI team had only certain capacity, and requests from all around the company took a lot of time. So gradually that delay between the requirements and the time that is delivered caused many companies to go through self-service BI. What is self-service BI? Self-service BI is designed for citizen data analyst, for someone who doesn't have any BI background, someone who doesn't have any development background, to be able to connect to their data and build their own report, their own analysis. I would say the most, I wouldn't call it major, but I would say the most common self-service data analysis tool is actually Excel. But Excel is used for a lot of other things, not only for this. So Microsoft came with Power BI, and other technologies. Tableau appeared in other vendors. ClickSense came as part of ClickView as their self-service data analysis tool. The idea behind all of these tools was that we make the data analysis so easy that everyone can build data analysis without having a background in BI, without going and reading tons of books to do that. They can connect to a data source and build a report. And Power BI is really giving everyone that power. If you install Power BI Desktop, you don't really need to know much about designing the database or much about how to build a data model or write calculations. You can connect to a data, you can present something, you can watch some of the videos online and learn on how to do it and just do it. There are some trainings that are focused basically on that, dashboard in a day. You go and build a dashboard in a day. So Power BI is designed for that, which is great. Now, with that power comes some challenges. The main challenge of having that kind of power is that then what happens with the governance? What happens with the reusability of your model? So when we empower everyone to go and build their own data analysis, in an organization that we have, let's say, hundreds of business analysts, then we would have hundreds of Power BI reports. We would have hundreds of separate reports, everyone having their own report. So Power BI would become the new Access or the new Excel, that everyone has their own version of it. And you don't really know which version to trust. Is it the Mike version more correct, or Jen's version, or they both are incorrect because someone else's version looks more accurate? And these wouldn't talk with each other. Everyone has their own silos of data analysis. So there is no governance, there is no reusability of this. So then technologies like Power BI started to bring in some components that would help in putting some more governance around it, making it more reusable. Instead of doing everything in one file, you can consider using some components. For example, let's say I'm a data analyst. I've been working with the sales team in my organization, and they asked me to build a sales report. So I spent some time, I connected to their data sources. They had information for customers, products, the sales transaction itself. I created the date table, and I built a data model and called it Sales PBIX. I published it, I shared it with them, they liked it. Then they go to other colleagues in other departments and say, like, Reza built this and we really use it, we like it. And then other departments come to me and ask for similar type of analysis. Let's say the inventory team comes to me and say, well, we want also similar report for inventory. Now, because this is a different team, their access is different, I'm going to build a new report for these guys because this is not similar to the sales. So in the inventory report, I have some, let's say, tables such as warehouse, such as inventory movement, but I also have some tables that are similar to what I had in the sales. Product, for example, or date. Product might be a table that I spent some time to build it, like I created this table as a join between 2-3 tables and created that table. Now, if I did that in the sales Power BI file, and I want to do it now in the inventory Power BI file, what are the ways for me to reuse my code? I can, of course, go to my sales PBIX file, open Power Query editor, copy and paste M code, or you can even copy and paste the whole, let's say, folder of queries and come and paste it in this new one. But that is not really solving the problem, because with that action, I'm getting two different versions of that date dimension Power Query script, one in sales PBIX, another in inventory PBIX. That means that in the future, if I want to go and change it, I have to change it in both places. Same for the date dimension. Date dimension is perhaps something you would use in 10 different Power BI files. So if you go and change it, you have to go and change it in a lot of different places, right? Something like this, if it is all done inside Power BI Desktop, inside Power Query of Power BI Desktop, would be really hard to maintain, right? Another example of that is when you have written some DAX expressions, some DAX calculations. You already created the model, you already created the relationship between tables, and sometimes relationships in Power BI can be quite a bit of a challenge to create, avoiding both directional relationship, building a star schema. Then on top of that, writing some DAX measures, which you might have spent really long time to create it and perfect it. Now you want to reuse it, like I have two report visualizers. Let's say they want to go and connect to my report and build visualization. So what I'm going to do, am I going to send them the PBIX file so that they go and build visualizations? I can do that, but the moment that I give my file, let's say to Mike, and he goes and build a visualization, at that moment, I have to stop developing something on this file myself, because if he builds a visualization and I do a change in the data model at the same time, then how we are going to merge these two? You cannot really merge these two files into one file easily. I mean, there are some community tools that can help you to compare tools, but it's not really that intuitive experience to merge the two files. So when you do everything in one file, it brings a lot of challenges. These are just a couple of challenges that I explained. What we do to avoid those is to isolate every layer of the development. For example, the ETL layer of the development, data transformation layer of the development, we isolate that into the data flow. Now I'm talking about the Power BI components here, but these can be used, can also use other components. So in Power BI components, we use data flow as a replacement of Power Query in Power BI Desktop. So we use data flow to connect the data sources, to apply some data transformations. It is using Power Query, so using that Power Query, I'll go and build my data transformation. It loads it into Azure Data Lake storage. There are actually two options for data flow. One other option is that it loads it into Dataverse. That is if you create a Power Platform data flow, but let's not talk about it. This is not a data flow session. Let's keep that quite light in this stage. So it stores it in a storage. The point about that data flow is that then that table that I create, the date table, the product table, can be used in multiple models. Then on top of that, we create something called shared data set, shared data model, whatever you might name it. Shared data set or shared data models are data sets hosted in Power BI service, which first time you go and create it in the Power BI Desktop. These are using the tables that are mostly generated in the data flow stage, like the date table, product table, customer table, the fact tables. You might have multiple shared data sets, like one for HR, one for sales, or you might combine all of them in one. That depends on how your structure of building the model is. And then the report wouldn't be part of the same file. We will create reports separately in another layer, which has live connection to that shared data set. So the report would be connecting to the data set as a thin report, we call it, a report without really having a data set of its own, connecting to an existing data set. And when we use that approach can be used for normal Power BI reports, for paginated reports, for connecting from Excel to that data set called Analyze in Excel. Even you can have like Tableau reports connecting to a Power BI dataset. This 3-layer architecture is quite helpful because you can replace any of these layers with something else. Let's say the data flow can be replaced with another technology, Azure Data Factory, let's say, or SSIS, or the shared dataset can be replaced with SQL Server Analysis Services on-prem or Azure Analysis Services. So the beauty of multi-layer development is that you can have multiple developers working at the same time, people with different skill sets working on their own area of speciality, and you have the maximum reusability of the Power BI solution. If you created a table in Power Query, you can reuse it in as many places you want. If you created a calculation in a Power BI dataset, you can reuse it in as many places needed. So all of these is life before Datamart. What Datamart brings into this? Datamart brings another layer inside this. So that combination of things that you see here, building a solution like this is taking a little bit of time. Why? Because each of these components has to be developed in a different place. For example, if you want to build a data flow, you have to build it inside Power BI website. Some of you might have already used data flow. So when you create a data flow, you cannot create it in Power BI desktop. Data flow is a service-only feature. You have to go to the Power BI website and then start creating a data flow inside a workspace in there. Once you build the data flow, then you want to, let's say, build a shared data set from it. Where do you go to build the shared data set? At the moment, you cannot build shared data set in the Power BI service. There is no authoring space for that. You have to come to Power BI desktop, get data from the data flow sources, and then build your data set. Once you build your data set, you publish it into the Power BI service. And once you did that, publish into the Power BI service, then you have to build reports. Reports now can be built in Power BI service or in the Power BI desktop. You see, it's a lot of like, I built this in Power BI service, I built that in Power BI desktop. It's quite a bit of challenge to build that whole solution because you don't have a unified modeling experience. And this is across everywhere. Let's say if you want to schedule your whole model to refresh, you have to schedule your data flow to refresh. There is no option to say schedule the data set refresh right after the data flow. You have to time it up yourself. Like you can say, if my data flow refresh ends at 8 a.m. And it is going to take 10 minutes, so I'm safe to say, for example, at 8:30, let's refresh my data set. But what happens if that refresh doesn't fail? Now, there are some workarounds for that. You can go and build a Power Automate flow that will check if the data flow refresh fails, then you, successful, then you go and refresh the data set, right? But that is another extra component to bring in. You see what I'm saying? This is not all intuitive modeling experience. You have different bits and pieces in different places. One other example of that is row-level security. If I want to set up row-level security, I have to set it up in Power BI dataset. In desktop, I have to write the roles in there. When I publish it to the service, I have to assign users to that. So the row-level security actually is in two different places. I have to build it in desktop, assign users to it in the website. Again, part in desktop, part in website. If I want to set up incremental refresh, I have to do it in data flow separately, and I have to do it in the shared data set separately. So although these are separate components of building one BI solution, they are not really looking like a component working with each other, because you build each of these separately. Now, what Power BI Datamart brings in, it first brings them all together under one big umbrella. So it tells you that, well, I'm going to build the data flow and the data set for you under one unified experience, under one UI, so that you go and build the data flow and the data set. You don't have to worry about going to desktop to build this, going to website to build that. You don't have to worry about refreshing this before that. I will handle all of those. You don't have to worry about row-level security situations that you apply part of it in desktop, part of it in website, or incremental refresh that you have to do it in each of these separately. I'll do that for all of those. So it's a unified experience. That is one of the most important thing about it. And also it comes with a middle layer between these as well. The data flow itself stores the data into Azure Data Lake storage. But what Power BI Datamart brings is also a database for itself. It's using Azure SQL database technology to store the data, the output of data flow into that Azure SQL database technology. It is much better database technology to use than CSV files stored in Azure Data Lake storage. So this time we actually have a data warehouse in place. Before that, we just had a bunch of CSV files stored in some folders in Azure Data Lake storage. Now that data warehouse, whenever I use the term data warehouse, a lot of people come and say, well, we don't call this data warehouse. Data warehouse is when we work with petabytes of data and things like that. That is not necessarily true in terms of the term of data warehouse. Data warehouse basically means a place that you store your dimensional model, your fact table, your dimension tables. Not every fact table is 3 billion of rows. There are fact tables that are even less than 1 million rows. There are dimension tables that are not that big. So data warehouse as a term doesn't necessarily mean big data. Data warehouse can be small as well, but it also can be big, right? The main thing is that it's a storage place for your dimensional storage. So Azure SQL database can cover that. And because it's Azure SQL database, it can scale up if you have a really big data storage, if you really need a big data storage. So this unified experience builds the data flow, the data warehouse in the middle of it using Azure SQL database, the data set connecting to it, and all of that through one unified web UI, which is what I'm going to show you in a second. So let's go and have a look at this. I'll show you a demo, then we'll probably go and take a few questions. So let me bring in a web browser in here. Yep, that's it. And sign in. So Datamart has to be built inside Power BI website. So everything to do with Datamart is in Power BI website. You don't even need to touch Power BI desktop at all. Everything is from the website. One thing about the Datamart is that it has to be created inside the workspace, not my workspace. And it has to be in a workspace that is a premium workspace. That is one other thing about the Datamart that is not coming as a pro feature. So any of these workspaces that you see that I have this little diamond icon beside it, these are premium workspace. Those that have this little guy beside it, this means premium per user workspace. If they don't have this little guy, they have just the diamond, that is premium capacity workspace. Now, I'm not that rich yet to have a premium capacity in my tenant, so I have just the premium per user workspace. This works in that situation too. I'll go and select one of these. So this is a premium per user workspace. I can show it to you that you can see it is under premium. It usually takes a little time to come. Yeah, here you see this is a premium per user workspace. So, and here I can go and click on new and I'll see Datamart in here. By the way, all the examples I'm showing to you, this is Datamart preview stage at the moment. So we'll expect this to come out of preview sometime, hopefully soon. I have no timeline to give you, but hopefully sometime. Some of the features I'm going to show you might be changed in the, let's say by the time that it is generally available. So I'll click on Datamart. This will take a little time to bring up that, that unified modeling experience for me. And building the Datamart always starts from connecting to the data. So remember that structure I told you, if I bring my slide here again, this structure, which we had data flow, data warehouse, data set. So it always starts with the data flow. So back in here, let's say I want to connect to a source. So I can use any of these sources or get data from another source. I think I have a URL which I can use as a source. Let me bring that in here. So this is similar to Power Query in Power BI Desktop. I can go and get data from any sources that I want. Let's say I'll go and choose OData as a source. OData is like an online web service URL type of thing, which when you connect to it, it gives you a database like what you see here. This link that I'm using, you can actually get it from my blogs. It's a public link. So here, let's say I'll go and select orders and related tables to orders to automatically select some other tables. I'll see the preview of the data in here, very similar to Power Query and Power BI Desktop, but this is all online experience. Then I'll click on transform data in case I want to apply any transformations. I don't think I would apply any transformations at this stage, but as you see, this is the Power Query online experience, which is kind of similar to Power Query in Power BI Desktop. Some of the functionalities here can be even more intuitive than, I would say some of the graphical interface options here can be much more appealing than the Power Query in Power BI Desktop. For example, here you would have things such as the diagram view that shows how you can have different steps. You can expand into steps, click on those, which we don't have it fully yet inside Power Query and Power BI Desktop. Anyway, here I can build my data transformation. Let's say this is already done. Let's say I don't want to do any further transformations. If I want to combine other data sources in here, I can do that as well. Like, for example, let's say I have a script for date table. Here is my script. I copy, paste it, and I come here. I'll create a new query, blank query, and I put my script for date table. You can also download this script from our website for free. And this creates a date table. I'm going to call it date. So I built my model like this. Then I go and save. Now, what happens when I save it? I'll bring that diagram again while this is doing the work. So this is now processing those and building this data warehouse for those tables, their structures to load the data into this. So I'm building the second layer at the moment, but all of that is part of one experience. I don't go and do it in other places. So the data warehouse and the ETL is all built like this. Now, when that is built, I will see this environment. This environment is that unified experience, part of that unified experience that I'm telling you. This is where I can manage my model more. So first, I would see all my tables in case I want to add more tables into this. I go to transform data. That will bring up Power Query to do some more changes in there. Another thing is that if I want to go and build a data model, this is also the place to do that. So if I click down below here, you see there are 3 tabs. The last tab is the data model. So when I click on this, this actually shows me the tables and the relationships, the diagram view inside Power BI Desktop. Now, my date table is not connected to anything. Let's say I want to connect it. So I'll connect order date to date. That would create a relationship, hopefully. One-to-many, this brings me the relationship designer where I can go and design whatever relationship I want. All of those features that you have in Power BI Desktop in terms of relationship design comes in here. So I can click and design these. I can, for example, go and select a column and say, for example, the order date in here doesn't need to be visible anymore. Let's make that hidden because I have the date column in here. Or the customer ID in here, I don't want that to be visible in here. Let's make this hidden. Or I don't know, any other changes. For example, you might say, well, the calendar year that we might have in this, or the normal year, it's a numeric field and it is a whole number. It is a whole number. You might want to say, well, I don't want this to be auto summarizable. So summarize by none. You see, all of these features are Power BI Desktop modeling features that now I have them all inside this experience. In addition to these, I can also go and build a new measure if I want, right? And you see that here at the top, I can go and build a new measure. So when I click on it, it gives me the measure editor. Again, similar to Power BI Desktop, I can say, well, this is freight year to date, and freight year to date is, let's say, calculate sum of freight from the orders table, and this is based on my date table. So then it would be based on dates year to date of the date field inside my date table. Close parentheses, close parentheses. So I create my measure like that. Now I'm not sure which table I created this measure, but that doesn't matter. I can move it from one to another place, right? So I built measures just like that. Now there are some limitations at the moment. I cannot build calculated column. I cannot build calculated tables. These two are yet to come, but at the moment I have this ability to create the measures anyway. One other thing about this environment is that there is also a tab in here which I can use. Now, when we go and use a reporting solution, sometimes it happens that we need to create like a flattened query structure. That flattened query structure can be used for building reports that that I want, such as like a paginated reports, a table view. For that table view, I would like to like flatten that structure, create a view, and then from that view, create a paginated report, right? This is what the query tab does for you. So in the query tab, I can actually go ahead and build a new query. So at the moment, I don't have anything in here, but let's say I can go ahead and create a new query. Now, this query can be a visual query. Visual query is like a Power Query based query. To create it, I can just drag and drop these items here. Let's say I'll bring order details. That would bring like the Power Query editor for me, then orders. Then I can say, let's merge these two. So I would say, well, we'll add a step, merge queries as new, order details merge with orders based on the order ID. You see how beautiful this UI is compared to the UI in the desktop. Let's say I will use the full author join in this case. Click OK, that will merge these two. You see this beautiful flow of thing. This will show me the preview of that from the orders table. Let's say I'm interested only in getting, let's say, the customer ID and perhaps the ship name and anything like that, ship country. I'll select that, and that builds, let's say, the table structure that I want. And let's say this is the query that I need. I can rename it and call it anything I want under here. I can call it, let's say, order details for report XYZ, whatever it is, right? I can create queries like this, as many as queries I want. Or I can create these queries as a SQL query. That is also another interesting point of that. So if I create a SQL query, this is actually giving me ability to write SQL statement here. Inside Power BI dataset, I can write select star, and select star is not the best thing to do anyway, but I'll just write it. So select star from orders table, I don't know, let's say left author join, order details table on orders, dot order ID column. You see it comes with this IntelliSense as well, equals to order details dot order ID, where this is your SQL statement. You can write exactly whatever you want. Now, let's say this is all good enough, and I just select the top 5 records. I don't want to wait for an hour for this to reply. So this works just like that. You write your SQL code, which is beautiful because we have that layer in the middle, we have this data warehouse. This gives us the ability to go and write our SQL command. So I can create my views this way or the visual way. It just depends on which way you prefer. If your users are more Power Query users, they can use this. If they are more SQL users, they can use this, and it gives you also an option to connect to Azure Data Studio. This is one of the new features added. Previously, you should have connected that separately yourself. So it's a lot of good things with it. And in addition to all of these, you also have this place that you can go and manage roles, create role-level security sections, and assign users to those roles. It's all in one place, not part of it in desktop, part of it in website. Another part of that is incremental refresh, that you do it in here. You don't have to do it in every, in a data flow separately or in a data set separately. So I've created this. Let's call this Datamarts, like I would call it Datamart Ukraine, if it allows me to type. Yeah. No, one more time. Okay. Datamart Ukraine. Okay. Now I can go ahead and even build the report right in here on top of it. I have the ability to do that, or after building it, I can create a report from there. Both are fine. Let's just use this option to show you what it happens. So if I create new report, it just connects to that data mart. These are the tables in my data mart. I can go and bring those, like those details in here, like order ID and the freight, or that measure that I created, which I don't know where I put it, but it was something year to date. Yet that is my measure as well. Now this measure wouldn't show anything yet because it has to have the date field in it. So probably I can go and use a date field in here, something like this. I'm going to remove some of these so that it shows me the date, and that for some reason this is not showing any dates yet. Anyway, I'm not here to check why my measure is not working or why it is working. The main point here is that this is your visualization. You go and build your report, your visualizations, you can save it, call this report something. This report can be also in another workspace in case you don't want this to be in this workspace. Or it can be inside this workspace. So I call this, let's say, Datamart Ukraine report 1, right? Doesn't really have much of a visualization in it, but it is a report. So now let's go to that workspace and see what happens. So when I go to the workspace and search for Datamart Ukraine, these objects are created. So first, it has created a Datamart. Right. It also shows me the data set related to that and the report related to that. Now, when I look at this view, a data mart includes the data set. So this is the data set exposed in there. You don't see the data warehouse, you don't see the data flow as a separate objects. That is one of the limitations at the moment with this environment, that you don't see those as a separate objects. I hope that becomes available. I mean, the data warehouse, you wouldn't see it here anyway, it wouldn't make sense, but you can connect to it from a SQL, from SQL Server Management Studio or something like that, which I'm going to show you in a second. So this is my data mart. I can schedule it to refresh or do anything I want, but let's first go to the setting of it so that I show you what it looks like. Oh, before that, let's have a look at the lineage view of this as well. So the lineage view also shows you, this is the structure. We have the report. Report is coming from a data set. It has a live connection to that data set. And the data set is coming from a data mart. Now, it doesn't show that in the data mart, we also have a data flow and a data warehouse. It doesn't show those parts. It considers all of that as one black box. I hope that changes in the future. You'll see those separately as well. And that also gets the data from the source, right? So I'll go back to the list view to show you what happens in the setting and how we can connect to other parts of it. So if I go to the settings, in the Datamart setting, I have a lot of configurations. One of those configurations is server settings. This URL is the URL that I can open it in Azure Data Studio to connect with this link, or I can use SQL Server Management Studio. This is the URL of that Azure SQL database. So I can open SQL Server Management Studio if I'm a database savvy and database professional. I probably prefer to use any of these tools that I'm comfortable with to connect to that database engine. Then I'll connect to that database engine with this authentication with my user, which is this. And the password that probably is going to ask me in a second. Yeah, let me just enter my password in here as well. And you don't see that password box. I'll enter it and then you'll see it in a second. Okay, entering password, sign in. Oh, the password was incorrect. Just trying one more option. Okay, so now it is connecting to that Azure SQL database engine. It's Azure SQL database engine like any other SQL database engines. I'll have databases under the database. This is the database that is generated for me. When I expand it, I'll be able to see the data under that. Now we expect to see these data under tables. However, for not for privacy, I would say for easier maintain of this inside the unified data model, Datamart experience, they have made those tables hidden. So you don't really see those tables. As you see, there is no tables under this. But if I go to views, this is where I would see those. So this is not like a very normal database. You don't have full access to this. Your access is only to the views. So I have a view for orders, a view for every table that I created, views for the relationships. I can query these by creating a new query, setting, writing, select a statement. I can use any of the, let's say, metadata queries that I want to do in SQL. The main disadvantage here, however, is that I cannot write any code that writes data into this database, or I cannot write any code that modify anything. The reason for them to not let us modify it is kind of understandable, because if we are able to modify it, then the problem that happens is that then how we are going to get back to this editor and get the support in here, because that modification we have done may not be supported in here. But I would still like to be able to write data into this, because one of the benefits of building this Datamart for me is that I can use another application like SSIS, like Azure Data Factory, to feed data into this data warehouse. That I would say at the moment is one of the limitations, but it's a preview feature. So I expect most of these limitations would be lifted, and this would be much more useful in the future. So in addition to connecting to this data warehouse itself, I can also connect to the data set, right? To connect to the data set, you might have already done this kind of thing, but it would be just basically going to that data set and looking at the setting of that data set. I'm trying to find where it is. So I'm in the data hub. I'm trying to find a connection to this data set. Okay, anyway, let's just connect to this workspace. That probably makes it easier. I can connect to this workspace URL like this, inside SQL Server Management Studio, connect to analysis services. This is where I'm going to connect, and my username is this. Connect. Okay, password, sign in. So now this is connecting to that Azure Analysis Service instance, which actually holds also the the analysis services part of it, the data sets part of it. When I expand it, this is one of those that I created before. This is another one. I'll see them. I think the reason that it doesn't show me that data set I have just created is that I haven't refreshed the data yet. I think so. Otherwise, that would have also come in here. So all in all, this gives me the ability to go and build the connections that I want. And the last part of my demo, then we'll go to some questions before the next part of presentation is that I can even open Power BI Desktop and connect to this Datamart. When I connect to the Datamart, I have the ability to choose, am I connecting directly to the data set of that Datamart or to the Datamart itself? So let's say this is my Power BI Desktop, and under Data Hub, I have the option to say connect to dataset or Datamart. Let's say I'll go and choose Datamart. Then I connect to the Datamart. It shows me all the Datamarts that I have access to. So this is the one that we have just built. Now, when I connect to it, I have these options, which is the interesting part. So I can say connect. Now, this means connect to the dataset part of Datamart, because a report connects to the dataset end of it as a live connection. Or if I choose this option, this is a direct query option to that Azure SQL database, depending on what you want. Sometimes you might want more, let's say, not high available, but let's say more live result than what you have in a Power BI dataset. You might go and choose any of these. So let's say I go and select this, then it would be like a normal Power BI dataset with live connection, and then I go and build my visualization. At the bottom of this, you also see that this is now a report with live connection. So I can have multiple reports building this and publishing into the website. Building the report can be done in the desktop or in the website. Okay, so now that you have seen some of the examples of this, before I explain more about Datamart, let's take some questions. If there is any, please. I'll open my chat window as well.
Yes, we have questions, so you can read them or we can help you with that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how many of those questions are already answered, but let me just have a look at this.
Okay, we are following those questions. So let me start reading them. The first real question is from Ashraf. Hi Reza, if Microsoft adds the dataset creation to the service in the future, is there any other strong value for using Power BI Datamarts except the provisioned built-in self-managed SQL server?
Good question. So I would say short answer is yes, definitely. The long answer is that so this unified experience is one of the things, or the database created behind it is also one of the things. The other parts of it is to make that whole experience a one modeling experience. For example, those things that I mentioned about setting incremental refresh in the data flow or in the data set, or setting row level security, probably in the data flow, in the data set, or like every part, like the refresh process, that you want to refresh that first and come and refresh this. So there is definitely still a value creating these queries that we go and create these like flat structure queries. So it would be definitely still a big value in it. Now you can go and build every different component separately. Of course, in that case, you wouldn't need Datamart, but Datamart basically makes this whole process an easier process for you. So even if we can build Power BI dataset in the future in the website, still there's a big value in the Datamart.
Okay. And another question, second question from Ashraf. Thank you, Reza. Is there any performance gain for using the provisioned built-in self-managed SQL server?
I wouldn't. Yeah, I'm not sure for that. And we should say performance gain compared to what? If we are saying compared to get data from the data set itself, I would say get data from data set probably would be faster all the time because it is in memory storage. that Azure SQL database is not always in memory storage, that is using a different technology. But reading data from there compared to reading data from Azure's data lake storage, I would say the Azure SQL database is a better option because it's more structured data rather than a bunch of CSV files and reading those CSV files. Even though it is in Azure Data Lake storage, the Azure SQL database would be a better option than the data lake.
Maybe I would like to expand the question. I think Ashraf wanted to compare this provisioned SQL Server with your own one. So for this provisioned SQL Server, I don't think we have some influence on indexing, etc. So with like your own, I guess there are some options that help you making queries faster.
Right. Yes. So in that case,
what kind of storage is there? Is there columnar storage or row storage and so on?
Yeah. So if I'm building that database myself, like that data warehouse middle layer myself, I will have more control around it. But that is for situations that I know how to build it and I take the liberty of building it. I kind of direct my data flow to store the data into that, which is another story how you would do it. But if all of those happens, yes, I have more access in the data warehouse or a SQL database that I built rather than the one that this is provisioned, because it is quite limited at this stage. In the future, this might have some of the limitations lifted, so I might be able to use a lot of those things in here, but at this stage, not much. One of the reasons that Datamart can be quite good in adoption of Power BI is that it doesn't really require, again, much of a let's say, database experience to go and build this. As you see, even if I'm not a SQL expert, I can provision this and it gives me that SQL backend.
Okay, thank you. I just asked Ashraf if I understood and expanded the question correctly, but maybe Andre could continue with other questions.
Yeah, no problem. We have a lot of, by the way, we have a lot of donations from Ukraine, Poland, Slovenia today. So thank you for your donations. You can still donate. The link is right there. We have a comment from Olga. I waited for data modeling capabilities in service for so long. So glad it is rolled out. So I guess everyone is. And the questions from Lisset. What's the basic difference on when to use a Power BI dataset versus Power BI data provider?
Power BI data provider. I'm not sure.
Me too. So, listen, what do you mean data provider? I can ask another question. The difference.
Okay, yeah. Let's go into another question
between Power BI Datamarts and data flows. So what's like the main point of choosing the right
between
backend
Datamart and the data flow?
Backend for your reports, which one to use, and what are the points to choose the correct one in your particular case?
Yeah, I would say Datamart and Dataflow are not things that you would like compare, because Datamart includes the data flow. It includes other things as well. So if I bring this slide, so Datamart includes the data flow and the data warehouse and a data set. Versus if you compare it with the data flow, so you basically get the data flow parts of it, which builds the tables, but those tables are not stored in a data warehouse in Azure SQL database. It is stored as a CSV file. You do not have the data set capability on top of it, which is like the tables, the relationships, the measures, calculations that you write. And if you go and build those separately, again, we come to the same problem that I explained before, that you have to manage every bit of that separately, with controlling the refresh of this, controlling the row level security in different places, incremental refresh in different places.
Yeah, the question from Vlad. Andrei, you copied that question. Do you want to read it?
Sure, no problem. So Vlad is actually, first of all, thank you for the presentation. May you share some best practices for versioning Datamarts and reports, like version control for codes?
So version control, the question that we have in Power BI that is always like, the answer is we are sorry. So unfortunately, Power BI is not really good with version control yet. So, like at the moment, with objects that you create in Power BI Desktop, you can do something about it. Like you can store it in OneDrive, or you can load it in TFS, Git somewhere, so that you can keep that version and always check in, check out type of things like that. But it's not part of the Power BI Desktop to like do like a normal version control features that you do in tools such as Visual Studio. And with the Power BI Service features, that's even worse, because in Power BI Service feature, you cannot like download the whole data mart. There is no way for that. It's a service-only object. With some of these objects, like data flow has been there for a while, you can export the JSON metadata of that data mart. It's a JSON file, which you can then keep that file somewhere. And whenever you want to build it again, you build it from that JSON. I imagine something like that would be available for data mart in the future as well. Not yet. So until then, probably we can't do much of a version controlling at this stage with the data mart. But I hope that Microsoft come with some version controlling. I've heard some news, and so fingers crossed, we'll hopefully see something about it sometime soon.
Okay, and so far we only have a comment from Olga.
Okay.
So Olga is actually replying to a previous comment. If you work on a Mac laptop, using Datamart will be an obvious way to avoid issues with desktop installation. Okay.
That is correct. Yeah, that is a very good call.
Okay, and I'm not sure if anyone has any extra questions. So last call for questions.
Okay, if there's no question, I mean, I still have some slides to go, so I can just complete those slides. And if you have any questions, just put it down, and we'll have a look at that in a second. So let's wrap it up how this Datamart really works. So Datamart completes that BI ecosystem. So that 3-layer architecture that you saw, this is kind of that architecture now with the data mart. So that data flow and data set built through the data mart, and also with the data warehouse in the middle of it. Of course, I would like to see these, especially the data flow part of it, exposed separately, because at the moment I cannot see that. The data set part of it, I can see it, but the data flow part of it, I can't. And I would like to see more access to the data warehouse, so that I can, like as Dion mentioned, I can go and build indexes, I can apply some performance tuning on it, I can even use another ETL tool to feed data into this data warehouse. So I would still like to see those, but this overall architecture is still kind of helpful. Now, another thing you need to consider is that the Power BI Data Mart is part of the workspace. So anything you do in terms of building the workspace structure in Power BI, that governs the data mart as well. You might end up creating data mart for some of your generic, let's say, data sets, and you might consider giving access to the users depending on their user end side of things. Your report can be in like sales workspaces, HR workspaces, versus the other parts of the data mart can be in other workspaces. So you can still manage that through the workspace. And the pipeline, the deployment pipeline, can also include the data mart. That is also another thing. You just need one license for this whole thing. So for using that Azure SQL database, you are not really paying anything extra apart from that premium license, of course. But for those of you who had premium license before, and you also paid for Azure SQL database separately, now you get all of that in one place. You don't need to pay Azure SQL database separately anymore. You get that as part of this. And I think like it can go even up to 100 gigabyte storage of Azure SQL database or things like that. I haven't read the whole documentation about that part yet, but one license would cover all of that. Now, let's talk about one of those questions that I think it was Ashraf or someone else also asked, that what is the point of doing this if I have, let's say, the data set up in the cloud, ability to create that data set in Power BI servers, or if I have already my data flow, if I go and create my own SQL and my own data set. So what is the main advantage of Datamart? Because at the moment, all of these are good, but it doesn't really look like a massive big feature. So what is in the horizon? Now, these things that I'm telling you in the horizon, it doesn't mean that Power BI team are working on it. No, these are things that I'm thinking would be possible now that we have that database. Before that, we didn't have a database, but now we have the database, that Azure SQL database. So that brings up a lot of possibilities. One of the things we have in a BI system is called slowly changing dimension, or SCD. This is talking about situation that when a dimension attribute changes, let's say in a retail business, we have a customer in Auckland. This customer, after, let's say, some months, moved to Ukraine. And I want to track this customer's movement. I want to know that up until, for example, April 2021, this customer was in Auckland. From April 2021, this customer moved in Ukraine. So this customer is purchasing something from Auckland branch until then, and then goes to another city and purchase from another city. So for this type of thing, what we do in data warehouse, we create like a effective from and effective to date, and say, for example, this customer is in this city from this date until this date. Then when the customer moves to another city, we'll create another record with effective from, and the to date might be either null or it might be just like a far end date. This approach is called slowly changing dimension type 2. There are like 7 different types of a slowly changing dimension. At the moment, you cannot do things like that easily with Power BI because there is no database. Now, there are some like workarounds. If you go and search on the internet, you'll find some people done some kind of workarounds to do that. But in fact, they are all workarounds. They are not really solution because there is no data storage. I mean, Power BI dataset is an in-memory storage. It's not really a data warehouse type of a storage for that. Now we have this data warehouse storage. Another thing is that now we have the data warehouse storage, we can also have things such as logging and monitoring of the data flow. Like back in SSIS days, for those of you who might have used SSIS, we had the ability to control more the flow of data. Let's say you have this data flow that is running every night, and one morning you come and see this was not completed successfully. You wonder why. Then you go and run that manually yourself and it runs successfully, right? So you have no idea what really caused that error. So you can't really debug it. Versus if you had the ability to, for example, say, if the data flow caused an error, then go and save that branch of data into a table so that I can go and track it. We don't have it as an intuitive experience yet. I have some blogs explaining about how to do error handling and things like that, but all of those are basically a workaround. We don't really have a database to store these branches of data, versus in SSIS we had that. We could have said, if it caused the error, store this whole batch of data somewhere so that I can try it, for example, in the morning and see what happens. Now we have the data warehouse, we have the database storage, so this can be an option. The snapshots of the data. How many times you heard from Power BI users that they would like to see what this report looked like, let's say, end of last month, and they want to compare it exactly with right now, right? So you have to hold a snapshot of data at that point of the time. We don't have it yet as well. Now, all of these are mainly because we don't have a data warehouse, a data storage, a persistence location for the data. Now, I'm not saying that Power BI team are working on it. I have no idea what other features they are working at the moment, apart from completing the existing Datamart experience. But I'm seeing this from my experience, based on what a data warehouse and a storage can bring in. I'm seeing these type of thing might be possible options to come. areas of improvement for Datamart. Of course, I would like to have more control on that database to write into that from other applications, and also apply some changes, like add some indexes, performance tune it. I would like to have the data flow part of it exposed. At the moment, it is not. If I have the data flow part of it exposed, then I can do a lot of things. Like I can, for example, create a staging data flow and then transformation data flow, rather than just one data flow covering everything. We still want to have that multi-layer experience so that it gives us the maximum reusability. And of course, I would like to see version control in this, as like any other parts of it in the Power BI space. So now I think is a good time to go and see if there's any other questions.
Yeah, we have people coming. Damian Videra and Ricardo Cabral, thank you for coming.
Also,
Right.
We have
Catalina is here.
one more question, if possible.
Hey, Damian.
Yeah.
Damien has a question.
Sure.
Yeah, so from Olga, she asks, what about data catalog possibilities in Datamart or in further roadmap of product development? Do you know anything about it, Reza?
Yeah, nothing that I'm aware of, but I guess the Azure Purview would have some ability to work with Datamart, and we might probably get some, let's say, data catalog features of that in there, so that we can mark these tables, columns, and things like that. So yeah, I would say there is a potential, but I'm not sure is it going to be in the first release of Datamart General available or not.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure if anyone else has any questions. In the streams, I don't see anything else.
I have another question, not maybe so directly connected just with Datamarts, but what I see is big importance, big stress on insecurity is coming on sensitivity labels. So it transfers security issues to end user or responsibility. And we have now sensitivity labels in SQL Server, in Azure SQL database, but they are somehow disconnected from Power BI labels. Is through Datamarts any connection done? Probably not, since this is just a provisioned database. Is there any plan to get this data automatically from a database to Power BI?
Yeah, that is also another good question. So at the moment, I think they are not connected. So at the moment, the sensitivity labels, the security labels from the database, I don't think it flows all the way to the like all across all the Datamart. But when I talked with the Power BI team, the idea was that this is the first edition. On top of this edition, we would have a lot of things. One of those was also this. Now, we don't know when something like this might happen, but I'm sure that this would be also in the horizon. So there would be a point of time that we wouldn't need to do sensitivity label in the database separately, and then in the Power BI environment separately. Datamart would cover all of that. But when? I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, so I'm not sure if anyone else has any questions. There aren't any questions in the streams, but just since this is the last session of the year, I just wanted to mention that Reza is actually literally on the other side of the world from me. So the most far away you can be on the globe, you are there. That's why it took so long to share the screen. And we actually had a question in the beginning because we thought that your screen would show up inverted. So my question is, what kind of computer magic wizardry are you using to show up yourself like horizontally and not the other way around? Because we expected you to be hanging from the ceiling.
This is the magic of gravity, you know?
But anyway, I really want to thank you for being here, because in your time zone, this is actually very early. So you started at 6 something in the morning. So thank you very much for speaking in this event.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity and for all of you helping in this. This is a great work you guys are doing, and I'm sure everyone in the community would appreciate that as well. And everyone joining as well. Thank you all for participating in this and helping the community and our friends in Ukraine and everywhere in the world. So yeah, thank you. Stay strong, and I wish everyone having a great end of the year.
Thank you for coming today. And I want to say that the last drone that we were fundraising in September is already at the front line. So the one that we are fundraising now, it's the second one that we started fundraising from scratch. So if you donate, it means that the guys will receive one more drone that they can defend our country with. Don't forget to subscribe to our LinkedIn page and YouTube channel not to miss our next events and fundraising. Thank you everyone for coming today and helping Ukraine and helping the world be safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Everyone, bye.
Bye.